You're watching The Ready Writer, a show where I get to speak to writers of all different genres, mediums, and experiences. The Ready Writer. Are you ready? It's time for The Ready Writer. I am your host, Casey Bell, and today's guest is Bonné Bartron. Let's get started. So, due to the pandemic, you had to stop working as in Hollywood, and you decided to write a book. Now, is writing something you've also been into since a child, or was this something that just happened last year out of the blue?
So I'm primarily a writer, I would say. I wrote my first quote unquote book whenever I was like 5 years old, literally. And then was published the first time in a children's magazine whenever I was in the fourth grade. So, there's a big path, I guess, of writing. Words have always been something that I'm much better in writing than I am in person, in my opinion. And I really like the opportunity to formulate my thoughts and like try to look at things from different perspectives. And that's one thing I love about writing narrative things, is being able to go into the perspective and the point of view of a character in a moment that maybe I've never experienced, but I could put myself into. So it's very much like acting as well. Like, I think most writers are also, at least in their mind, actors.
Mhm.
So, and I did act a lot as a child as well. Like, that was something that I was really, really into. But I realized as I got older that, being in front of the camera wasn't really my favorite thing. My favorite thing was like writing characters and then watching other actors bring something else that I didn't imagine when I was writing to the character. That's one of my favorite parts of filmmaking. But as a book, that was my first book. Whispers was my first book that, was published and out there for the world to read.
So, other than the pandemic, what was it that said, write this book, Whispers?
Well, so the last 4 years, things that have already been happening in this country, to people of color and to marginalized communities kind of intensified. And I felt like there were a lot of voices that were trying to shut down a really important movement in our world, which is equal rights. And I felt like they were trying to shut it down because they didn't understand it and because we were being lied to. And then I noticed that there was something else spreading with COVID. And it was a dark and hateful kind of undercurrent that, to somebody like me, I'm an Army brat, like I immediately, it smacked me of something, dangerous from other countries that I've seen, growing up. And through discovering this, what looks to be a psyop against the American people, I decided I wanted to say something about what I was seeing, and I wanted to voice my support in a way that would maybe be able to reach the people that were pushing so hard against the equal rights movement. So I wrote Whispers as a narrative to kind of explain the way that I saw racism firsthand in the world as a white woman. Because, a lot of times if you are not experiencing something, like a lot of men try super hard to relate to women, but if you don't live that life, it's really hard to really understand the root of the issue. And that, I think, is something that even if a person wants to relate, if they don't have the opportunity to engage in some way with the community that, or actually like live the life, honestly, that even if you are trying to be an ally, sometimes you can be a problem. And that was pretty much what I wanted to focus on for Whispers, was to kind of illuminate how self-righteous allyship can also be a really big issue, unless you're just trying to amplify somebody else, as well as kind of show the this undercurrent of hate that was being pushed through the internet and even through the media, toward, you know, the peaceful protests that were the Black Lives Matter, and, you know, the spin that specifically like QAnon put on everything. So that made me just feel like I was trying to say things to people. I was trying to have these conversations, but I felt like we just kept hitting a wall. Like there was no conversation to be had with the people who were in that mindset. They didn't want to have a conversation. And so that was the part that really scared me. It was like the breakdown of any communication or any willingness to hear another person. You know, that scared the shit out of me, to be honest. I was like, this isn't good, people. We need to, like, you know, see each other a little bit more, and a little bit, like, try to see each other a little bit more clearly. So anyway, I felt like the more I was speaking up, the more I was being silenced. Like TikTok, for example, muted me for like a month, where I wasn't allowed to post, and then like they throttled my viewers whenever I was speaking out. And Facebook, I kept getting, you know, warnings because I would just put up a post that said like Black Lives Matter. I'd get a warning because somebody reported my I mean, just ridiculous things where I was just feeling like, are you kidding? We can't even go out in public. We can't even like talk to each other. And now I'm being muted on the few things that I have to communicate with, you know, the world around me. And that's whenever I just decided, okay, gotta write it. And to be frank with you, I feel like it was given to me. Like, I feel like Whispers was something that like somebody had to write it. And I was lucky enough to pull that string, you know, and because that book, I mean, it pretty much wrote itself. I wrote it in 4 months. The editors and I worked on it feverishly to get it out because I wanted it out before the election. And nobody at that time knew about QAnon. And that was the thing that like killed me, is that so many people had no idea what was really happening in the country. There was a whole group of people who were hyping each other up to become militant against another group of people in the country. And it was like, no, wait a second, hang on. We all need to know what's going on here. So long story short, really long answer. That is what prompted me to write Whispers.
And what has been the response so far from the readers?
Well, as you can imagine, it's been pretty polarized. Whispers has had some incredible reviews, and I'm so grateful. And I mean, the overwhelming majority of it has been vastly positive. But I will say that there are definitely some people who are in that same mindset, like the election was stolen mindset, that have come in pretty hot. So it's funny, like we were laughing about this the other day, that like it pretty much either has a 5-star review or a 1-star review. There's like nothing in between. So that, I mean, I take that as a point of pride. Those 1-star reviews, like, I'm not gonna lie, when they show up, I'm like, oh yeah. But every one of them have said they read the entire book, and I'm like, I got you to read the whole book though, didn't I? Even if you hated it. Anyway, it's terrible, right? Maybe we should strike.
Well, hopefully, at some point it'll come back to them, you know, because sometimes you can eat knowledge and you not receive it, and then like maybe 5 years later something happens, and it wakes you up. You remember that you read something that was true, but you were too arrogant to receive it. So maybe not all of them, but hopefully some of them will realize how wrong they were and hopefully change.
I hope that it helps. I just hope that it helps people who were taken advantage of by that movement to wake up. I don't think that the people who wanted to be in that movement will ever wake up, because that's their choice. Like, they chose to be those people. But I do hope, and like that's my dream, that like some people who are, really good people who just believed the propaganda. I mean, propaganda is a hell of a thing. Like, it started wars for centuries, So I do hope that like the people that were victims of the propaganda, I hope it helps them. That's really the people that I wrote it for more than anything, are the people who are the ones who believed because they thought they could. They thought that that was, you know, they had faith, and that faith was taken advantage of.
Right. So this was your first book published, and you did it so quickly. How did you know where to go to get it published and who to turn to for help?
Well, so, I mean, that's a great question, because to be completely frank with you, like, I felt like I was adrift in the ocean without a paddle. Like, it was a very, you know, new world. And even for someone like me who's, you know, written a number of scripts and shows and stuff, it was a new world. I am fortunate enough to know two wonderful women, Jade and Wilnona, and they are authors themselves. And were super generous with all of their information and their, you know, their experiences, because they've published a number of books. And I also have a few friends who are agents, like, you know, big company literary agents. And I spoke with them and got advice from them as well. So long story short, I was originally thinking about publishing it with one of the big 5 publishers, but the earliest that I could get, the earliest publication date I could get was March this year, 2021. And I knew I wanted it out before the election. So I decided to indie pub it, as they call it. And we put it out, and it hit the bestseller list and stayed there for over a month. So we were really fortunate. I mean, to be frank with you, again, I feel like this book was given to me, and I do feel like we had like guardians all the way. And 2 of the biggest guardians were definitely Jade and Wilnona.
Awesome. Yes, I've met them. Fun
Yeah,
ladies.
they're wonderful ladies. Wonderful.
So last question. If you could meet and chat with an author, who would this author be and why?
Well, I have actually met and chatted with a few of my favorites. But one that I haven't met yet would be Margaret Atwood. I think she is absolutely freaking brilliant. And everything I've read from her point of view is so firm and confident and still vulnerable. And it's something that I feel like is so rare in anything, but especially in books and literature. And yeah, I mean, I just think that we would get along like fire. Like, I think that we would have more than enough to discuss for a few days.
Well, that's all the time we have for you today on The Ready Writer. Bonné Bartron, I really want to thank you for taking the time to stop on by, and to the audience for watching, thank you so much.